Once upon a time, there was a village of fools. Everybody in the village was a fool. And the greatest fool of all, his name was Shlemiel. Shlemiel lived with his wife and his children. His wife grew a few vegetables in her vegetable plot and would sell them in the market. But Shlemiel's job was to look after the young children. He wasn't clever enough to do any work at all. One day he heard stories of the capital. Now Shlemiel had never been to the capital. He had never been outside of the village of Chelm before, and he wondered what the capital might be like. So Shlemiel, once his wife had gone to the marketplace, he said to his older children, "Today you look after the young ones. I'm going to visit the capital." And he got an onion and a crust of dry bread and he put them inside his shirt, and he set off, wearing his old worn boots with holes in the soles. And he walked through the streets of Chelm until he came to the edge. And there at the edge of Chelm, he stopped because he'd never been outside there before. And then he saw the road to the capital and he started walking and the sun shone down. And he sang to himself as he walked, and after many hours with the sun high in the sky and hot, Shlemiel stopped. He needed a rest. His old boots were worn thin and his feet were aching, and he sat down by the side of the road and pulled off his boots. But before he went to sleep, he pointed his boots in the same direction he was walking towards the capital, because he wanted to remember when he woke up. And while he slept and he dreamt of being the king and eating homemade strawberry jam on a silver spoon, while he was sleeping, a thief came along. And the thief saw this poor fool lying by the side of the road, and he reached inside his shirt and found an old onion and a crust of bread. And then he picked up those boots. Boots! Oh, they stink. And the soles are full of holes. And he put those boots back down on the road, but pointing back towards Chelm. And the thief went on, and when Shlemiel woke up, the sun was still high, and he looked at his boots and he thought, "That's funny." And he pulled on those boots and walked in the direction that they were pointing. And he walked, and he walked, and he walked, and the sun was high and it got lower, and finally at the end of the day he saw a village ahead of him. That's funny, it looks just like Chelm. And when he came to the houses, they looked just like the houses in Chelm, and there were people saying, "Hello, Shlemiel, you don't know me," he said. "I come from Chelm." "Well, this is Chelm," they said. "What? Another Chelm? I didn't know there was another Chelm between Chelm and the capital." And he went through the streets until he came to a house that was just like his own. And he pushed the door and it opened, and there were children playing that were just like his own children. I mean, they were as like to his own children as drops of water are to each other. And there was a woman, and she looked just like his wife, and she said, "Shlemiel, where have you been?" And he said, "Oh, you don't know me. I'm Shlemiel, but from the other Chelm." And she said, "Foolish man, come in and have your supper." And there he sat down and ate his potato soup. "But I'm not Shlemiel." "You are my husband." "I am not," he said. "Your husband, perhaps he left at the same time as I left the other Chelm. Anyway, you're definitely not my wife. My wife would never give soup to a stranger." Well, there he was eating his soup, and then she showed him the bed, and he lay down in the bed, and soon he was asleep. But in the morning, the other people of Chelm had gathered around the bed, including the wise men, who were not really wise, who stroked their long beards and scratched their bald heads. And they said, "Are you really from another Chelm?" And he said, I am, and I must go to the capital. I am leaving now." "You can't leave," said Mrs. Shlemiel. "Who's going to look after the children?" "That's right," said the wise men. "Who's going to look after Mrs. Shlemiel's children?" "Well, I can't. I'm going to the capital." "Pay him," said Mrs. Shlemiel. "Very well," said the wise men. "We'll pay you to look after Mrs. Shlemiel's children until the other Shlemiel comes back." And they agreed to pay him 6 guilders every week. Well, there was Shlemiel waiting for the other Shlemiel to return, and did he? No. Of course not. He stayed there for days, he stayed there for weeks, he stayed there for months, he stayed there for years. He got older and older and kept thinking, well, maybe one day I'll go to the capital. But life was good. His family were rather nice, this other Shlemiel's family, and certainly this other Mrs. Shlemiel was nicer than his own wife. And as he grew old, he would always say to people who visited him, you know, all roads lead to Chelm. Those who stay in Chelm are certainly in Chelm. The world is one big Chelm.